You want to make the pitch easy to understand, repeat, we talked about that. You also want to use words that create visual images. I had one guy who was selling an expense-reducing capital project to a company, and instead of saying you're going to save $180,000 a year, he said, every year you don't do this, you're crashing a Ferrari in the parking lot. People said, huh? Yeah, you buy a pretty good used Ferrari and auto trailer trader for $180,000. Now, if you're a large publicly traded company, $180,000 in cash doesn't really sound like a lot. It's a rounding error, especially if the investors are offshore. But nobody wants to see a Ferrari crashed, right? You want to make sure you find out about the other person first. Why? Because you have to be able to know which arrow to pull out. You cannot have the same elevator pitch for every person. It's not a one and done, okay? It's a repertoire. And you have to practice. My wife belongs to the Women's Presidents Organization. She was recently at a conference, actually here in Florida, 700 women in her national conference, and she decided to do her elevator pitch. So they said, Rachel, what do you do for a living? She said, my husband and I have a company in San Francisco, and we teach energy professionals how to sell. And every one of the women said, that's interesting, which means what? It's not. Actually, they weren't lying. The definition in the Oxford English Dictionary, interesting is something that is capable of engaging the human intellect for a brief instant. But unfortunately can't make a sale in a brief instant, okay? So then she says, I gotta change this up. So now the next 6 women, they asked her, Rachel, what do you do for a living? She said, my husband and I teach people how to sell. And every one of those next 6 conversations ignited in a conflagration of conversation. Why? Because these were women entrepreneurs. And there's nothing more important than sales to an organization. Right? When I was at Wharton, the entrepreneurial management professor, first day of class, he asked this group of newly minted MBA wannabes, what's the most important thing you need for a business? And people say, protectable intellectual property, a market niche, good strategies, patents. He says it's all bullshit. The only thing you need is a sale. You need somebody who's willing to pay you a check for something that you're going to sell. And it's absolutely true. So what does that mean? When you're doing your elevator pitch, you got to stay on point. You got to stay on point. There's another TED Talk I want you to look up. It's Benjamin Zander. It's basically How Great Leaders Inspire Action, I believe it is. In any case, no, it's actually, no, it's the title something else. With Benjamin Zander, he's the former conductor of the Boston Orchestra. And he told the story, this audience of 4,000 people, half in Vail and half simulcast in Aspen, I believe. He told them that when he reached the age of 45, he'd already been conducting for 20 years. And it finally occurred to him after 20 years of conducting that the conductor doesn't make a sound. He said, my entire approach to conducting an orchestra changed. People would walk up to him, Ben, what happened? He said, that's what happened. He said, well, how do you know if you're, what are you doing differently? He said, since I now know that my entire ability to entertain an audience in the opera hall depends upon my awakening the potential of the people sitting in front of me, I now know I have to awaken their potential. And the only way you know you're doing it is if your player's eyes are shining. If my player's eyes are not shining, I know that I'm not being the conductor that I can be. And I'm going to put that right in your faces right now for sales. If you are giving your elevator pitch and your prospect's eyes are not shining, you have to ask yourself, what kind of a sales professional are you being that your prospect's eyes are not shining? When you tell them in 15 seconds or less how you will create value for them. And my challenge to you is you have to change your elevator pitch until every one of your prospects' eyes are shining, okay?